Hello there, welcome to the Football Bloc. My name is Brandon, and today we're going to look back at the 2025 Gold Cup Semifinals, and we're going to see how accurate my predictions were. So if that sounds interesting, let's hop right into it.
One step beyond.
So the Gold Cup semifinals have come to a close. We have the final set up. We have U.S. going up against Mexico. But before looking on to that match, let's look back at the semifinals here and see how these teams played and how these matches developed and how my predictions went. So the first match we're going to look at, we have the United States versus Guatemala. And as I said before in my previous videos looking at the Gold Cup, the fact that Guatemala made it all the way to the semifinals is a victory within itself. No one really expected them to make it further than this point, considering the fact that no one expected them to make it to this point in the first place. And even though they ended up losing here to the United States, it was a very, very admirable performance from the Guatemalans here. That being said, there is a clear talent gap between them and the United States, and that was seen very clearly in the opening minutes of the semifinal here, where Diego Luna just exploded into life. Now, he has had a wonderful tournament up until this point, but you felt that with each and every game coming, he just got better and better. He was great in the last match against Costa Rica, and now he reached his peak up until this point against Guatemala. The first goal that he scored, it was mostly a tap-in, but it was a good, quick footwork from him. But the second goal was one of the goals of the tournament, where he picked up the ball on the wing in the best area that you want him to be in, and then with a quick step over, he wriggled through the two defenders and then sent a beautiful shot into the lower bottom left corner there. The United States is up 2-0 in this game. Guatemala is shell-shocked, and from that point on, the United States did kind of sit back and just try to protect their lead, which I think they probably shouldn't have. I think they should have gone and tried to score a third and a fourth, because all that did was allow Guatemala to basically have all the freedom to attack from there. And this Guatemalan team, their strength is their attacking firepower, as we saw against Canada, as we saw against Jamaica, as we saw against other teams in this tournament here. And it was basically all Guatemala from that point on, and they caused the U.S. some serious trouble. They had so many more shots, so many more just possession of the ball, so many more chances created. And you can say, you have to add the context. The U.S. got a 2-0 lead within the first 20 minutes, so of course they're going to sit back and defend. But still, you have to give Guatemala a lot of credit. And then I think in the second half, actually, there was a lot of cause for concern. When you look at how Mauricio Pochettino, he switched up the back line. He subbed out a lot of players, subbed in a lot of new guys, but from a defensive point of view. And that, I think, actually had the inverse effect, because this back line, which was pretty solid throughout the entirety of the first half, with all these new guys in, there was just a huge mix-up, basically, which led to the goal that Guatemala scored to have the deficit, to make it 2-1 on the night. And within the last few minutes of the game, it got really, really chippy there. It got really, really cautious. And I gotta admit, I thought that Guatemala might actually score the equalizer there. And then also, you felt that if they had scored the equalizer, it's 2-2, goes into, penalties or something, Guatemala has all the good fortune on their side, all the momentum. So luckily, from a U.S. perspective, that was not the case. They were able to hold on to their lead, and they progressed to the final. There are some positives that you can take from this victory. Like I said, Diego Luna played very, very well. I thought that the partnership between him and Malik Tillman, which has been developing throughout the entirety of this tournament, was on clear display here. Very good performance from both of those players. Defensively, though, which has been a recurring issue for the United States, you did see that here. And as good as Guatemala has been in this tournament, they're not a top team. You just have to be honest. And this is concerning, that if the United States goes up against a top team with this backline, what's going to happen. In fact, we know what's going to happen because we saw the friendlies heading into this tournament against Turkey and Switzerland, who are good teams, but yeah, they're not even like, Brazil or Argentina or Spain or Portugal or something like that. But just focusing in on this tournament here, I think that the United States did just enough to overcome Guatemala here. And then, like I said, Guatemala can leave with their heads held high. This was a very good performance from them. Now looking on to the other semifinal, and we had a similar match where it was a David versus Goliath. We had Mexico going up against Honduras, and this was a game that was different because you'd have to say both of these teams throughout this tournament have been more pragmatic, more reactive compared to the U.S. and Guatemala, who are much more attack-minded teams. And this game started off with Honduras actually having all the momentum on their side, and I wouldn't say they had like super clear chances. They did have a lot of shots on goal. They did create a lot, but they weren't, troubling the goalkeeper that much. But still, they had all the potential for scoring. It was in their favor. But you come to expect it with this Javier Aguirre side, where they kind of just wait for their moments, particular with breakaways, in particular on set pieces and things like that. And Mexico was incredibly dangerous on set pieces throughout the entirety of this game. And they were able to hold on throughout the entirety of the first half without conceding a goal. And then in the second half, they did kind of explode into life. Mora there, the youngster on this team, he had a wonderful game. In particular, he set up the goal for Raul Jimenez. Very clinical strike from him. He blasted it past the goalkeeper. 1-0 to Mexico, and at that point, it was all Mexico. They almost scored a second there. Edson Alvarez did put it into the back of the net after a set piece, but it was judged as being offside correctly, in my opinion. So after that point there, though, Honduras had, a few half chances in the last few moments of the game, which looked a little dangerous. There was some cause for concern in the Mexico backline, but for the most part, it ended up being a pretty straightforward Mexico victory, even if it wasn't super dazzling, super convincing, or anything like that. I think that they ultimately proved that they were a deserved team to go through. As for my predictions for both of these games, I thought that it was going to be 4-2 to the U.S., and the U.S. would go through. It would be a shooting match, and they just had the larger arsenal. That's essentially what happened. And it wasn't 4-2, it was 2-1, but still, that was the general vibe of the match. Now, for the Mexico game, my prediction was that it was going to be 1-0 to Mexico, goal from Raul Jimenez. And that is exactly what happened. I got this one straight on the money. Now, again, Mexico play every single game the same exact way, so it's not the most surprising prediction there. But same thing with Honduras, though, as with Guatemala. They can leave with their heads held high. Honduras is a team that historically is one of the best in CONCACAF, but they have not been that great for the past 10 years. They have been one of the teams that don't perform, that don't show up in these tournaments here. They haven't been to the World Cup since 2014, for example. It's been a long time since they went this far in any Gold Cup as well. So the fact that they were able to get to this point, and then also considering how poorly they started the tournament with that 6-0 drubbing against Canada, the fact that they were able to not only recover from that, but then make it farther than Canada by the end of the tournament is very impressive from there. And from just a neutral point of view, you hope that both Guatemala and Honduras can build upon this victory here and, maybe turn their fortunes in the other direction and continue improving with the coming years. But let me know how you guys did, if you did predictions, and also what did you think of these games here. They were pretty fun overall. Even the Mexico-Honduras game, which didn't have a lot of goals in it, there was a lot of drama going on. Let me know what you thought of all these matches here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Share this video with a friend. Follow the Football Bloc on social media. But anyway, guys, my name is Brandon. This has been the Football Bloc, and I hope you have a nice rest of your night.
One step beyond.